Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dogco Secrets podcast. My name is Michelle Kline. I am your host, and I am also the founder of Dogco Launch, where pet care companies come to grow and scale. In today's episode, I want to talk about top strategies to protect profit inside of your pet care business. So let's get into it. This episode is a very tactical lesson on profit protection. So I'm really not going to be talking about key principles or anything like that. I'm going to be giving you straight tactics. I'm really going to focus on 3 areas that you can use as leverage points to protect margin inside of your business. Now that I have said that, I do want to preface with one strategic principle, and then I promise we'll get straight into tactics. When it comes to profit, I have found that there are some very key strategic ways that we can increase profit. The long game is profit protection, more so than increasing profit. Now, yes, we should test and tweak and dial in ways that we can increase profit in your business. However, the real skill, the real art form is learning how to keep that margin once you've opened it up. So we're going to talk a little bit on both sides of that today, but just know when you hear me say things like protecting margin, it's because I have found once you figure out how to get it, keeping it really is the art form, because there's so many different ways we can deploy resources, and it's so easy to eradicate margin really quickly once you have opened it up for your business. All right, so 3 areas we're going to talk about today. The first, we are going to talk about labor costs. So I know there's probably something inside of you that just went, ugh, I know. My labor margin, it's not fun. It's not the sexiest topic. I get it. It is the highest point of leverage inside of your business. Let's say you come to me and you're like, Michelle, I have very little profit in my business. I'm struggling to pay myself. It's feeling really, really tight. I'm starting to get a little panicked. What do I do? Well, the first thing I'm going to ask for is your profit and loss statement. If you don't have one of those, it is time to get a bookkeeper. There are some really good, not even good, there are great bookkeepers in our industry. Average bookkeeper is going to run you somewhere between $250 and $500 a month, depending on the size of your business, and maybe more, but usually that's kind of the range that I see. And most people I work with are somewhere between $300 and $400 a month with the bookkeeper that they work with. Not everybody, but just so you know, if you're like, I have no idea how much that would cost, that's a general frame that I see very regularly. And yes, it's an investment. If you are unclear if you can afford to make that investment, it means that you cannot afford not to, with less double negatives. If you are unable to see clearly into your numbers, you need to make an investment into someone that can help you get that clarity. And that can be a really good indication you don't have clarities if you don't know if you can afford that. So well worth it. I like to make the joke that's 100% not a joke. When I started my pet care business, I got a bookkeeper 3 years in. When I started Dogco, I had a bookkeeper lined up before I ever made a single dollar, because I don't mess around now with having a great bookkeeper relationship. If you're ready to take your pet care business to the next level, then I want you in the room at the Dogco Business Summit, October 2nd through the 4th in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We have brought together the very best speakers we could possibly find, and we are getting the best companies in the room to help give you the path to grow and scale your pet care business. Go to dogcosummit.com to learn more. Maybe I should have started with the profit and loss and number clarity. We cannot protect what we cannot see. So that actually is lesson number 1 on profit protection. You have to be able to see inside of your numbers to know how to protect your profit. So first things first, if you don't have a profit and loss statement, if you're not really sure how you would go about creating that, if the time to learn would slow you down, bookkeeper. A lot of good ones in our industry. It's an investment, but a really good one. Second is going to be labor costs. So going back to that example, Michelle, I'm struggling to pay myself. It feels really tight. I'm worried about making payroll. First thing I am going to do once I get that profit and loss statement is I'm going to look at your labor. So just so you have some benchmarks for healthy labor in our industry, all in labor, so both team and admin, I love for companies to keep under 55%. And that sounds low to some of you. That may sound high to some of you. Typically, people are like, wow, I don't know if I could ever have a full admin team at 55. you might have to get scrappy. You might have to get creative with pricing and fee structures to open up enough margin to do so, because it's a proportional relationship. It's like, if our pricing's higher, easier to keep our labor low. There's a balance there for sure. But all in, I recommend under 55%. I have seen some companies operate up to 60% that I would still consider healthy. I have had some companies, very, very few, but my largest companies, so think over 7-figure, operate at 65%, and I would still consider them to be decently healthy, depending on what they do with their operational expense. For 90% of companies I work with, I want to see you under 55%. So, and there needs to be a really clear return, no matter what size you're at, if you're above that, as far as what the admin labor is freeing up for you. That's going to be the most important. Typical split I encourage companies to aim for is to have field labor somewhere between 40 and 45. That's going to give you 10 to 15-ish% that you can put towards admin without getting in a funky spot with your labor. So that is my recommendation. Few different ways we can look at reducing your labor costs if they're high. Number one, whatever your starting pay is, looking at what wiggle room do we have to bring people in at a lower rate? Because part of what I see companies, like the struggle that I see companies have, is they start people too high. So they immediately hit the ceiling of what they can afford to compensate. And then it's like there's no growth journey in the business. They can't afford to ever give people a raise. It makes retention really difficult. Starting lower is helpful. It gives you more of this runway. And the good news is that means that newer people who are providing less value to your team because they are new cost you less for a window of time. And in this business model, you're always hiring. So that in and of itself will offset your labor costs, even if you still have people that are slightly higher paid. Number two, the structure of the pay itself. I don't want to present this one as a universal truth because I have not seen this play out in every situation. It is worth examining, though, if you are in this position. Very often, companies can save a really decent amount of margin if they're paying per piece by transitioning to hourly. It is not uncommon that when I look at a company paying hourly, the pay structure they've set up for what they compensate visits for is much higher per minute than it would be if they paid hourly, because they're trying to make it quote unquote worth people's time to go. And because legally you need to be factoring in drive time. That is paid time. Like that is time where someone is required to be on the clock for your business. So you kind of have to buffer it in different ways. And very often I see people overshoot. So an example, let's say you compensate $12 if you pay per piece for a 30-minute visit. And let's say on average, somebody on your team could get 1.5 30-minute visits, like once they do drive time and like get to the next appointment. The hourly equivalent of that pay is $18 an hour. Now, I do have some companies in higher cost of area living where that is what they would have to start people at hourly to attract talent. I work with a lot of other companies, though, that they can start people in the $14 to $16 an hour range because you factor in tips. That's still a really competitive wage. So there may be opportunity to reduce the overall labor margin by moving people to hourly with a set hourly wage, something to consider. And then third way you can really look at your labor cost, trimming those down to protect profit, is going to be to look at the efficiency of the paid time on the clock. The two areas of opportunity there, and both of these assume an hourly wage, which can be much more profitable, but you do have to manage differently than per piece. The two ways that we can really affect the efficiency of paid time is to adjust routes to be more strategic, so less paid time in the car. And then also to really watch the clock with people to make sure that every minute's accounted for. We don't have just extra time ending up on the clock. And typically, the biggest area of opportunity here is going to be checking clock in and clock out to make sure that people are not even unintentionally kind of padding the time clock. And then the biggest one is going to be that people are not staying over on pet care visits. Because, 2 minutes here, 5 minutes here, the bigger and bigger your team gets, that's a lot of time you're paying for. And that's just going to eat that labor margin and kind of pull it further and further up, which will pull your profit margin further and further down. All right, so that's the first category. Few strategies on labor. Told you all this is going to be really tactical. Second category, pricing and fee structure. So this is kind of the equivalent of the labor cost. So if labor is going to be your biggest expense, pricing is going to be your biggest adjustment when it comes to margin as far as like bringing more in. So we want to look at both of these things because they work in relationship to each other. One of the easiest ways truly to adjust your labor margin is to raise prices and to not do anything with compensation. That can immediately add 20% to your bottom line, depending on how and what price increase you do. So we want to look at when is the last time you did a price increase? Are you doing them regularly? Are you the cost leader in your market, which I would like you to be? And my loving challenge, dear listener, please stop using the phrase, I can't increase my pricing. It's just fundamentally untrue. It is your business. You can do whatever the fluff you want to. You're choosing not to raise your prices. Now, there can be very valid and very strategic reasons to not raise prices right now. I'm definitely not one of those business coaches that's like, just raise them, see what happens. Like, no, there are a lot of strategic considerations when it comes into pricing. But I have decided to take a much more definitive stance. If somebody says to me, I cannot raise prices, no, you are choosing not to raise prices. That's very different. You are not a victim to your pricing model. You are choosing not to do them. That can be valid, but I think we need to own that choice because otherwise we're acting like it's out of our control. It's not. You're just choosing not to do it. So looking at when you last did a raise, and then I would recommend, I've gotten really preachy about this one, if you offer any services before 9 a.m. and after 5 p.m., those services, I believe, should have a surcharge on them. Somewhere in the ballpark of $5 to $7, you are not going to see really an adjustment on client booking behavior from what I have seen with the several dozen companies I've worked with that have rolled these out. If you start getting in the $10, $15, $20 per visit surcharge, maybe you'll start affecting behavior. Even then, I have seen a lot of companies in that fee structure range that are still booking the level of pet sitting that they want. Those fees will significantly help your profit margin. They can help cover admin costs. They can help cover weekend manager. They can help if you have other service lines that are slightly less profitable. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is one of the lowest frictions, highest return moves you can make for your business. All right, so we have covered labor costs. We have covered pricing and fees. Final area I want to talk about is evaluating the return on investment for any marketing spend that you're doing. I know in recent episodes, I have talked a lot about the 80-20 principle. Part of the evaluation here is looking at, what in your marketing could you actually spend more on to get a higher return? You do need to be putting money into your marketing machine or time. Those are the two choices. But if you want new clients, we have to pay for those new clients either in time or in money. Those are the two ways. Otherwise, your business will grow at a much slower cadence than it could, which maybe you're fine with. But if you want to grow and you're looking to bring in new clients, those are your two options. And so if we are looking at protecting profit, we want to make sure that where you are directing that marketing emphasis is actually working for you. What does this look like in practicality? Tracking where your leads come from, tracking where you are spending both time and money to get new clients. And when you see patterns of what's working, removing resources from areas that are not and putting more resources behind areas that are. I had a conversation with a company, and I know she wouldn't mind me sharing this story. Google ads were working really well for her. And she was like, okay, so I'm spending about $1,000 a month on Google ads. It's working really, really well. She's grown a lot this year. And she was like, what else can I go do now? And I was like, nothing. Let's spend $2,000 a month on Google ads. That is just an example, but when something is working, that is not when we try and add in other channels. That's when we actually pull more resources towards what is working. So that is the third area that I would get really focused on with your profit, because we want to make sure that whatever you're putting in to kind of like push the engine of the business forward is generating a return, because otherwise it's just eroding margin and there's better ways we could use that. All right, everybody, I hope this was helpful. Let me know your thoughts. Tag me on social media and I'll catch you on the next one.